Nine nine. That's what they say on Brooklyn Nine Nine. If you didn't know, that's like their team chant. Nine nine, because 99 Brooklyn 99. The precinct is 99. They're the 99th precinct. So Brooklyn 99, Brooklyn 99, 99. You see how it works. Um, I took a ton of notes on this show for you guys, so I want to. Jesus, it's like a lot. But the title of this post of the Brooklyn Nine Nine post was like, what let's say America? I don't remember what I said. Could look like or should look like, and or at least what TV could or should look like, which is, and everybody hit this in the comments and in class, like this idea of intersectionality and inclusivity that the show has an obvious commitment to, right? This stuff isn't by chance. The fact that the cast is so diverse from a from a racial standpoint, from a sexuality standpoint, from a gendered standpoint, is you know is an affront to sort of the status quo of the sitcom, or the traditional um, negatively stereotyped version of the sitcom. Um, it's a great use of diversity, whereas with the PC movement really uh, gaining steam and momentum in the mid '90s, and it continues today. Um, Diversity became sort of a concession, another concession of those in power. It's just like, oh, they want diversity. Okay, put a tokenism became the reaction to that PC movement, so to speak. Like, okay, give them a black character, not a positive black character or a positive gay character or whatever it is. Like, give them what they want, which was generally a stereotypical black character, and have them exist for the sole nature of being the black character, right? Tokenism to its core. This show doesn't do that, right? It's a great use of diversity, exploring marginalized groups, and we've been using this catchphrase, I guess, for most of the last couple of weeks. This idea of exploration versus exploitation of race, sexuality, gender. Those are um, the big three issues that we're kind of culture is obsessed with and focused on. And you can look at any show and be like, okay, is it exploiting the issue or is it exploring the issue? And Brooklyn Nine Nine is consistently exploring race, exploring sexuality, exploring gender, and how it sort of functions um, against the backdrop of the NYPD, which I think is another, I think, calculated and intriguing decision to make this about the NYPD, right? Again, forecasting, like, this is what it could look like, if not should look like, you know. Um, so this idea of exploitation versus exploration is it's really, I think, compelling when you look at this show specifically, because I mean, it is constantly exploring. Like, this one's an easy one. It's like, I think it's definitely exploring all of these issues. um, their each character's identity matters, if that makes sense, right? Who these characters are matters, not what they represent, if that makes sense. And we've been, their identities matter, not their race or ethnicity or gender or sexuality, to the success of their character or to the likability of their character. We don't like them because they're the black character or they're the gay character. We like them because they're Santiago or Holt or whatever. It kind of ties into the whole Dev Raj thing, right? If you need to crystallize this concept of exploitation versus exploration, right? Raj, the character from Big Bang Theory, and I know I've mentioned this all last week, but it bears repeating. Um, Raj, he is on that show exclusively to be the Indian character and to provide them with access to the litany of Indian jokes, right? He does the accent, he performs Indianness basically, or the stereotype of Indianness. That's why he's on the show. We don't, no one cares about who he is as a person, his identity, or anything. He is there to be Indian. Whereas Dev talks about this in that episode that we watched, but the whole series is, you know, it's about exploring Indianness and, yeah, his race. It's about exploring that and learning about it and educating people about it. Um, that's just a fundamental difference, and it's easy to see when that happens. Um, I, I, I brought up um, Tom. Aziz plays Tom Haverford on Parks and Rec, but he's Indian. We know that. We can see it, but it has no bearing on his character, right? His race is incidental in this case. I think that's what Brooklyn Nine-Nine does with all of these sort of volatile issues is that your sexuality is incidental. It has no impact on how you do your job or how you relate to people. Your race, your gender, all these things are incidental in terms of the person that, or the character, let's put it that way, right? And their ability to be happy and do their job and be successful and be respected. Yeah. Um, so the show has a commitment to inclusivity, as I sort of have been talking around that point already. Um, if you look at the breakdown of the characters, right, it's so diverse. So you have Rosa is a Latinx bisexual character. She comes out as bisexual later in the series. So woman, Latinx, bisexual, right? Yeah. Santiago, Latinx, um, femininity has no impact on her job, right? So she's a woman, she's Latinx, but she's not. The way they use those two women isn't in uh, typical female tropes of sitcoms or movies or whatever. They're never fighting over a man. They're never sort of trying to undercut the other because of a promotion or a job. Their femininity has no impact on how they do their job. Right? They're both. It really is a meritocracy, which is another. Shouldn't America be? Couldn't America be? Shouldn't America be? Based on a meritocracy. Um, Gina Gina's that character that everyone's like, oh well, she's kind of ditzy and dumb and materialistic and all those kinds of things. But I think the message with her is she's unequivocally herself. and she makes no apologies for that. She knows who she is, and that's who she's going to be. She's not going to change herself for you, or you, or you, or you. Yeah. And she's outspoken, and she's opinionated, and she's, yes, that is a strength. Um, Boyle is a sort of feminized version of a man, right? Like he's supposed to cut against that. He's a foodie, and he's always speaking in very feminine, traditionally feminine terms, things like that, and the way he dotes on Jake and all those kind of things. Um, Holt, right? His sexuality is incidental, so he's the black police captain, black gay police captain. Like that's crazy, right? Um, it's not. His sexuality is incidental in the way, you know, Tom Haverford's race is incidental. Um, then you have Terry Jeffords, played by Terry Crews, huge, jacked, like supposed to be. You think you're gonna get the angry black man, right? The but he's super sensitive, and he's obsessed with his twin daughters and being a dad. Like you just don't expect that. Um, and the clinchers for the show are Hitchcock and Scully. Like Hitchcock and Scully are the two old white male cops, and they are the butt of every joke. Every episode, they're sort of made an example of, which is, I mean, that's not even a veiled metaphor for kind of where this is headed. Like, this is the future of, you know, police work or society, is this mixing of races and sexualities and genders and identities to bring the best out of each, right? Not Scully and Hitchcock. They're these dinosaurs. That's the old way, right? Even those of you who compared Brooklyn Nine-Nine to like other crime shows, cop shows, like SVU and Criminal Minds, and I mean, there's thousands of them, right? That's kind of Hitchcock and Scully are sort of archetypes, right? The old white cops who usually save the day. This time they're buffoons. They are they are to be mocked and made an example of in this new this new world, this new NYPD or whatever you want to call it. So the characters are built to do these things and to call attention to these ideas. Um, what are we doing here? Disrupting stereotypes as arbitrary, basically. That's really what they're trying to do. Again, it's not a tokenism. Like I think I can't remember who mentioned this in their comment, but they're not just. I think it was Summer was talking about it from the other class, right? You have to have some stereotypes, build them up to break them down. So this exists in this world where that's already happened. I think we're not supposed to expect the black guy to be a certain way or the gay guy to be a certain way, and this show shows you why. I think um, doesn't rely on limiting tropes of the sitcom either. Um, right, in especially with women, right? The uptight Santiago never has that moment where she always wears like the power suits and she's always got her hair up, and um, they don't have that moment where she takes her ponytail off and her glasses off and like, oh my god, can you believe like she's also attractive? Like they don't have that sort of trope. And infighting like with her and Rosa doesn't exist. It's like what the media usually likes to do with female characters. It tries to steer clear of those kinds of things. All the traps, all those traps that the sitcom has set for characters of color or different sexualities or genders, like they try to avoid or at least subvert in some way. Um, Especially with the women, the things that do have an impact on their work is as their intellect, their work ethic, their instincts, all of those things. This is all the characters. What they bring to the table is more than their race or their gender or their sexuality, right? It's their, like I said, intellect, work ethic, instincts, those kinds of things are what make them good at their job, not, or likable characters or whatever you want to call it. And all of these things are raceless, genderless, sexless. Like just, I guess that's the meritocracy thing at play. Um, it doesn't, the show doesn't ignore or trivialize the journey or the experience. And this is back to exploitation versus exploration, right? If you're going to exploit a race or a marginalized community for laughs, um, you're basically trivializing what that community has experienced and has gone through, and this tries to at least acknowledge those struggles and explore the roots and the impact that those struggles have on those communities, right? You see it here with um, Captain Holt in this episode, right? They talk about what he must have had to go through, you know, the picture of him and his husband off to the side and being accepted and, you know, all those kinds of things. So they don't ignore the journey or the experience, right? They explore it. They give it um, they give it time. Uh, it has this very it doesn't it it's not it wasn't easy, but we're not done either kind of mentality, which I've been talking about a little bit. Like the struggle hasn't been easy, and yes, we have gone through many struggles and got made progress, but we're not done with that. It's going to continue to be difficult, but we need to do these things for the greater good. Um, it doesn't stoop back to the Raj comparison, the Big Bang Theory, or pretty much any traditional sitcom. It doesn't stoop down to take those uh, cheap shots or low blows against these different communities that we're talking about. But at the same time, it doesn't, it's not looking for us to pat them on the back for doing this. Like the end of this episode, like we talked about this with Dev in the Master of None episode, where he's like, the show doesn't end with this like sweeping, hey guys, being racist is bad. Like, so don't be racist anymore, okay? Yeah, like give us a medal for talking about this. This is the same with all of these ideas and issues. Um, it's not looking like Peralta figures out the case, right? Realizes he's been kind of a shithead, but not everyone's like, hey, Jake, that was great that you did that. Like, it doesn't pat itself on the back. He kind of self reflects and I think really wants to change, wants to learn and change and be better. And he has that moment with Kevin, and they move forward um, in a good way. It's a perfect balance of humor and issue. I think it's a really funny show. Like a lot of people think that if you're doing shows about issues and diversity and all this kind of stuff, that sucks the humor out. It can't be funny. Like, this is proof positive that that's not true, that dumb people say that. Um, I would argue that it's more funny because it's about something. Like, that's typically a stance that I'll take, considering my job. But I think it's funnier because it's meaningful, and it's more meaningful because it's funny, if that makes any sense. Um, Balance of humor and issue gives these issues more depth, avoids punchlines and catchphrases. And when you do this, you'd think more TV shows and sitcoms especially would learn this. When you avoid just, you know, setting up stereotypes to play off of each other and try to have them more diverse and working together and exploring, not exploiting those issues and ideas, your show never gets old. Like the character of Raj, I know I keep going back to this character, but he's emblematic of an entire, industry of characters. After one episode, you know who he is and you know who he's going to be for the rest of the series. He says his catchphrases, he does his accent, and you're like, that he's done. You can't develop that any further. It's like by the end of season one, you're out of ideas. But if you're focusing on exploring these characters and their identities, it never gets old because you're learning more and you're not going to the same well every single episode to get laughs or to get stories. Um, so there's that. We'll get to your comments in a second. Never self-congratulatory, doesn't pat itself on its back. Like Jake in this episode of the party, right? He's earnest about changing, right? When he's confronted with his own ignorance, he tries to make it right. Um, he's thoughtful, he's compassionate about otherness in this case. Nobody, this is sort of like it doesn't pat itself on its back. Nobody cheers for Jake for not being an asshole. Like, we shouldn't be like, oh wow, Jake wasn't a piece of shit today. Give him a fucking medal. Like, these are things that we should be doing without seeking reward, right, or acknowledgement. With this show a lot, in this case, it's sexuality, right? The target isn't the difference. So the target of these jokes isn't that Holt is gay or his gayness, right? It's the ignorance surrounding his gayness. And in many cases, race and sexuality and gender, like their genders. Those aren't the funny things. The funny thing is making an example of people who don't get it, who don't understand, or who don't, care to know, right? Or are ignorant to these kinds of things. Okay, I'll get to your comments now. Your comments. Wait, Peralta. Yeah. This episode literally, yeah, I wrote that. This episode we watched literally explores their identities, right? They have that powwow at the party, and Jeffords goes through each one. Is like, okay, here's something about you that isn't your race or your sexuality or your gender, and he goes around everybody. So that's one episode. Like, this is again an exploration, not an exploitation. Um, Peter brought up the oppression Olympics and how he thinks gay people have won the oppression Olympics. I think it's funny. Um, and I mean, there's no official stats on it, so you might be right. It might be true. Um, but Holt making a case, right, in this, he's certainly discriminated against more because he's gay in this, in his position. Um, and then Peter mentioned, I forget where I heard it, but I once heard a black gay woman state how it's harder to be gay than black because she never had to come out as black, but she had to come out as gay. That woman was Wanda Sykes, and you heard it in Funny Women class last year. So, so you're welcome, is what I'm trying to say. Um, yeah, it's uh, it's a great bit that sort of puts things into perspective, and I suppose supports your oppression Olympics comment. Um, Stephen, it's Stephen was talking about, where is Stephen? Um, I thought it was funny that a few of you were like, I'd never heard of this show, and I thought it was going to be like a crime serial or something. Kind of, it's tough to do a comedy about cops, like really is, and it does it, um, because it's not as much about the casework or whatever, or the cases that they do. Um, you, I wrote, it's difficult to stereotype characters. I don't know what that means. Now I'm looking through. Um, yeah, it offers the ability for the characters to adapt over time and not be locked into a certain expectation. That's kind of what I was talking about before with Raj and the like. And the like. Um, Raj kind of is that representative of that character where you're limited to your catchphrases and your accent and your race or your, whatever reason you're there for. And you can't do that with these characters. Tessa, Tessa brought up how it's kind of organic. Like the actors have a lot have also a lot to do with the writing and directing and producing of the show. So it's more of this kind of communal effort, which I thought was cool. I didn't know that. Um, and the actors are also, many of them are politically active. Um, Terry Crews has spoken out about his sexual assault, um, and harassment cases, um, sort of a spokesman for men who are are put in that situation. I do know that. Um, those were nice tidbits to know. I liked I liked your comparison to The Office. Um, you know, saying that The Office is funny mostly because of the characters' exaggerated personality traits, right? Um, and that takes away a lot away from the meaning. I liked that comparison to The Office. Um, and then you go on to say, at least my takeaway from this was no one treats Holt differently because he's gay. Like that would be problematic. That would be um, unfortunate. But none of these characters do, right? I think you're talking about, yeah, the episode when the team finds out that he's gay, they're like, oh my god, surprised, but they're not, you know, they don't treat him differently or tiptoe around it, or they treat him like a human being. Like, oh, that's such a novel concept, right? Um, they treat everyone in their precinct like a human being, except Scully and Scully and Hitchcock at times. They treat everybody like a human being and how they would want to be treated. Like humanity should be. And then I noted Thomas. Uh, Thomas talking about he had watched the entire first season basically after watching this, which it's one of my great joys in life. Is we cover a lot of shows in this class. We watch a lot of different TV shows. It's something like 40 different TV shows. And I love hearing that watching it in class turned when it yeah, turned people on to watching the rest of it, or got people into it, or introducing a show to people. So I love hearing that. That uh, this was your window into a new show. Um, so I love hearing that. I'm going to give you a bonus extra credit word for today, and that word is going to be tomfoolery. Use the word tomfoolery in your response to this post and receive extra credit toward your final grade. Tomfoolery. You know how it is.